Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Coaching the Bible. This is episode 213, season 4, episode 53. I know you were thinking it's in the afternoon, the holiday is coming. I'm sure on your mind was, is Vinny going to record and send out an episode of Coaching the Bible? Well, those are the parameters. Of course, that's true. But if that's what you were thinking, we have more to talk about because, come on, you have better things and more important things and bigger things to think about and talk about and worry about as the holiday of Sukkot, in English known as the Tabernacle. The Feast of the Tabernacle is upon us beginning this evening. Our topic of the week this week is what I'm calling on Sukkah Leadership. I'm making up another term. I like to do that. I think it helps me grow, it helps me learn, it helps me produce. Sukkah Leadership. Here we go. Starting with a quote from a gentleman by the name of Robert Jordan, who's the author of The Fires of Heaven, the Wheels of Time series. I saw a bit of it on, I think it's an Amazon television show. Anyway, here's the quote. The oak fought the wind and was broken, but the willow bent when it must and survived. If you're wondering what this fantasy novel writer has to do with leadership, then stick with me for just a moment. This quote is not just about trees. It's really about life. It's about leadership. It's about resilience and those real tricky moments when we face more wind than perhaps we ever asked for. And effectively, I think it's about the sukkah or the sukkah, or as it's called in English, the tabernacle. That humble booth, the temporary structure that we build on this holiday that we go and we sit out in, that we move out into for the period of the holiday. It's a mixture of some sticks, some branches, a little bit of a roof. And if you live in areas where the winter has already come, then you're not keeping the rain out. But it does fulfill the commandment, and it does actually teach us profound lessons about leadership. Lessons that matter to us, again, as always, whether it's leading a team, raising a family, guiding a community. So let's break it down. We're going to talk about two things in particular today. Vulnerability, one, which we talked about way at the beginning of Coaching the Bible, and impermanence. The first one, vulnerability, is as vulnerability as strength. The sukkah, this incredibly and intentionally fragile structure, is actually very much a symbol of vulnerability. It's exposed, it's open to the elements, just like we are as leaders, parents, community organizers, and yes, as individuals, just simply trying to make it through our own lives. But here's the thing. Vulnerability, like we discussed it at the time, and we're going to share here, is often seen as weakness. But that's not really true. Brené Brown, who we've always talked about, is the rabbi on the subject of courage and vulnerability, says like this. Vulnerability sounds like truth and feels like courage. Truth and courage aren't always comfortable, but they're never weakness. Truth and courage aren't always comfortable, but they're never weakness. Now let's think about that. Vulnerability isn't about being weak. It's about being brave enough to stand there, even without all the answers, even without the perfect solution. It's to admit, I don't know, and I need people around me to help me. And here is the even deeper part of that vulnerability. When you do that, you really don't lose respect. You gain trust. So on one hand, you don't lose the respect. On the other hand, you gain trust. People don't follow perfect leaders. They follow, important word, they follow real leaders. Leaders who aren't afraid to say, I need your help. It's leaders who aren't afraid to say, I don't have all the answers. It's leaders who aren't afraid to say, I need a good, smart, effective, impactful team around me who are the experts in their area who are going to help us get us through. And this is where the sukkah comes in. Like that little fragile hut, we may not always be able to stand strong on our own, but that doesn't make us weak. It does make us, however, wise enough to rely on the strength of others, to create an environment where that shared responsibility leads to collective growth and ultimately success, impact, wins, whatever term you want to apply at that end. There's a beautiful teaching that we know from the Ethics of the Fathers, in Hebrew known as Pirkei Avot. In a place where there are no leaders, strive to be a leader. We know it well. But here's an important thing about that statement. Sometimes being a leader means knowing when you can't carry everything alone. It means that you know when you need other people. Vulnerability, that's what happens in that moment. You are vulnerable in that moment. isn't about stepping back. It's about stepping forward with honesty. It's saying, I may not know the exact way forward, but I believe firmly that together we can find it. So that's the first lesson of what I'm calling Sukkah leadership. And here's a practical takeaway. The next time you're faced with a tough challenge as a leader, whether that's in your business, whether that's in your family, that's in your community, that's on your team, resist the urge to act like you've got it all figured out. Instead, invite those around you to the table. Bring the team to the table. Share your vulnerability. Share your concerns. Share your thinking. You'll be surprised at how much strength comes back to you when you open that door. So that's lesson number one in Sukkah leadership. Think about that as you're sitting out there. If you're going to be sitting out there, think about that. If it's ripping cold where you live this time of the year, then don't sit out there and do that. But look out there and look at it during the course of the holiday. Contemplate it. Spend a couple of minutes on it during the holidays. That's number one, vulnerability. Number two is impermanence. This is a really important and deep concept, but crucial, vital for this moment. The sukkah is temporary. We build it knowing that it's going to come down very soon. It's a structure that's only meant to last for a short period of time, just a number of days. It's not a permanent house. It's not a permanent structure. It's not a dwelling for an extended period of time. And you know what's super important about that? That's actually a good thing. Part of what we're trying to do is develop an appreciation, not just of the vulnerability, but also an appreciation of the realization that nothing is permanent. Embracing impermanence doesn't actually weaken us. It makes us resilient. Heraclitus, the ancient Greek philosopher, I stumbled on that one, sorry. The ancient philosopher once said, no man ever steps in the same river twice, for it's never the same river, and he's never the same man. What he's saying is that everything changes, and everything changes all the time. The river you step in today won't be the same tomorrow because the water has flowed, the current has shifted, and you are not the same person tomorrow that you are today, or the day before, or the day after. And that's where impermanence connects directly to resilience. When you understand that nothing is permanent, you stop holding on to things that are already slipping away. Think about the institutions, the buildings, the personalities that we held in a certain level of permanent high esteem, or that we thought were indestructible, that in fact weren't. I remember all the years that I built this little temporary hut outside in our backyard in New York, every year trying to come up with another way to make sure that the roof didn't blow off, or that the lights didn't blow, or that the fans worked, whatever it was. And every year something came along, a strong wind, a hurricane, a bad storm, ripping cold weather, like I mentioned before. And you realize you cannot win that battle. And that's actually a good thing. Once you stop resisting the change, you start working with it. So resilience isn't about standing firm and refusing to budge. It's about adapting, like that willow that we mentioned at the beginning that bends but never breaks. The Sukkah reminds us this truth every year. It's built to be temporary, just like the different stages of our life. In leadership, in parenting, in building your community, in building your relationships, the successes we find today do not and never do guarantee success tomorrow. But what's really important about that is that's where the magic lies. That's where the opportunity is. When you accept that things will change, you free yourself up to adapt, to rebuild, and to make something even stronger. You also allow yourself to open up the aperture, to widen the gaze and the vision, to see things that are just outside of your peripheral vision, because nothing is permanent. The people in the desert knew this. The wilderness, they built their Sukkot knowing they were temporary structures. They lived in this space, although it was for many, many years. If you hold of the idea that maybe this is talking about a representation of the divine cloud that God shrouded them in, that was also impermanent. It only lasted for a period of time. They trusted in their resilience. They trusted, obviously, in God. Their faith wasn't in the permanence of their structures, but in their ability to rebuild as they move forward. And that's where real resilience comes from. Real resilience comes from impermanence. Here's a great quote from Marcus Aurelius, the Roman emperor, Stoic philosopher, who leave out his impact and his role in connection to Jewish history. In his writings, he led with awareness that everything, whether it's power, whether it's wealth, or simply life itself, was fleeting. In his meditations, he often reflected on impermanence, writing, "The universe is change. Our life is what our thoughts make it." Aurelius understood that while leaders can control the external forces of change, they can, however, control how they think about and respond to those changes. True leadership, then, is not about resisting impermanence, but about adapting to it with strength and intention. This mindset allows the leader to face the challenges not with fear, but with a sense of purpose and resilience, knowing that adaptability is the key to sustained success. So here's the practical part of this. Look around, whether in your work, in your family, or your community. Where is it that you're holding onto something perhaps too tightly? Where are you trying to make something permanent that's actually already changing? Instead of resisting, embrace that change. See it as an opportunity to rebuild, because like the Sukkah, when you accept the impermanence, you open that door to incredible levels of resilience. It's a super important practical point. We do this. We hold on to things. We stand firm, rigid on things that are already have slipped away or are slipping away from us because nothing is permanent. And so sit in that for a minute and then adapt based on that. But here's one additional thing. Vulnerability and impermanence aren't separate lessons. They work together. When you're vulnerable, you're admitting that you don't have control over everything, that things might change, that yes, you might fail. And when you embrace impermanence, you're acknowledging that no success, no structure, no solution is forever. And the power, though, is that resilience comes from living in the space between vulnerability and impermanence. It's in that honest, adaptive, super uncomfortable space that real leadership, real change, real growth happens. And so the Sukkah and Sukkah leadership teaches us to be vulnerable, adaptable, and resilient. The strongest leaders are those who bend with the wind, who lead from a place of courage, and when the structures around them feel most fragile. And let's end with a quote as we always do. This is from Vivian Green. I think we've actually mentioned this quote. Life isn't about waiting for the storm to pass. It's about learning how to dance in the rain. Leadership isn't about waiting for the perfect moment. It's about embracing the messiness, the uncertainty, and finding a way to keep moving, to keep dancing, even when the storm hits. So in the end, be like the Sukkah, be vulnerable, be open, and be ready to rebuild. And don't forget to dance in the rain. That is Coaching the Bible for this week. Those of you celebrating, have a wonderful holiday. Happy Sukkot. Happy Tabernacle Feast, whatever you want to call it. I do look forward to seeing you next week.